We are live. Good. Okay. So good morning, one and all. Let me see who's here. Okay, nice group. So as I'm just pulling um, the page of the Mishnah Brura up, so I sent an email yesterday. You know, just wanted to get everyone's comfort level of resuming in-person shiurim. We would, of course, keep the Zoom option, as I was explaining to Simeon yesterday. This something that I've gotten used to, teaching in person and also having students on Zoom at the same time. It's an interesting dynamic, but one that I've already gotten used to now for about 9 months. So that would continue. I would foresee that continues, because it affords us the opportunity to record this year in a way that allows people to see faces. The one change, maybe, if we are to go back in person, of course, is that I would actually hand you printed sheets, which you may actually appreciate. And then for those who will be joining on Zoom, I would just send it as a PDF beforehand, and be printing it out would be a lot easier in order to be able to see your faces when we're doing the shiur. So that's what we're thinking. I'm just trying to get a sense, really, of. I gather that most people actually do want this to go back to in person for those who are local, and I think this whole group is vaccinated. But I just need to figure out the davening schedule going forward. There may be changes in the weeks ahead of the Shachar schedule that, try to resume something that looked like a Shachar schedule from beforehand. So I need to work that out with our Morgenstern, and then we'll make a decision when to make the move back to in person. But I would imagine the next couple of weeks it will happen. Okay, very good. We were last we left you. Our discussion was centered around again the topic of a partnership between a Jew and a non-Jew, and the big concern here was if the Jew has a stake in the business, is he making, and he doesn't want to work on Shabbat, but he makes this deal where the other guy works on Saturday and I work on Wednesday or whatever day of the week. The question was, is the Jew making the non-Jewish shaliach of the business, or his shaliach for his share of the work that has to get done on Saturdays? Is he making him a shaliach on Saturdays? And we said that if the pair make a condition, a tanai beforehand, that acknowledges that I as the Jew have nothing to do with the business on Saturday, so then there is no issue at all whatsoever, nothing. We saw as well that the Shulchan Aruch paskin in a situation where, let's say, they didn't make this stipulation beforehand, then what would have to happen is when they arrive at the situation of divvying up the money, the non-Jew needs to take 1/7 of everything that's in the bank or in the cash register, however you want to call it, and then they would split the remaining money. Now that is. I think that's sort of where we left off in the Mishnah Berurah's comments. We were about to discuss that particular point. If I'm not mistaken, I think we were up to Vav. Does that sound familiar to everybody? I think we were up to Vav. Yeah, okay. I see Steve is shaking his head. Yes, okay. So again, we're in Reish Mem Hey, Sif Katan Vav. This point where it says Mutter that's when the deal was made beforehand. There was a Tanai, there was a stipulation that the Jew gets one day and the non-Jew gets Shabbos, and whether the schar is a lot or a little on that day, that's their day, and that's a mutter arrangement. And so here, the Mishnah Brura Here we go. Zoom in a little bit. Right over here in Sifkat on Vav, hopefully the screen, there we go. Sifkat on Vav says, it's mutter, v'im lo noda achar kach revach shel kol echad v'echad al yomo. Let's say the profits for any given day are not known, right? And look, no company, sometimes it can be complicated to keep track of the daily profits that occur. Certainly before you had computers keeping track of transactions, this may have been more complicated. Some stores, maybe it's really hard just to keep track of, money coming in, money coming out, again, in a pre-computer world. So then lechatchila, made the arrangement, you made the stipulation. Now you can't figure out how much was Shabbos, how much was Sunday. It's a mishmash. It's a very muddied situation. So it's fine lechatchila to just split it 50-50. You can assume that, generally speaking, the business, on any given day does about the same as any other day. Obviously, there's give and take, but you could just make that assumption when you are splitting the profit. So therefore, in that kind of arrangement, you could just split everything 50-50, assuming the arrangement between the two partners is 50-50. Now, it's interesting here, in my edition of the Dirshu Mishnah Brura, they quote from Rav Moshe here. You don't have this in front of you, but just listen for a moment here. Ubir b'sheila suchupo sigros Moshe she'ena kavana lechanus she'en efsharus levara kama ravachim shahayuba b'chol yom she'im kein hatanai eno tanai. It's not like we're talking about it. We're not dealing with a store that it's impossible to calculate or to separate out the profits of each day, because then if you could and you don't, then what was the tanai in the first place? What was the stipulation? It's not, you're not taking it seriously. You're just doing what you want to do. That kind of arrangement is not really permissible if you're making fake tanaim. Ella hakavana hi lachanus she'efshar ledas kama ravachim hayu b'chol yom ella shetzarich litzroach b'shvil zeh. The type of situation, according to Rav Moshe, that we're dealing with here about what kind of store could you do suddenly not know how much you made every day. It's not that you can't know; it's that it would require a lot of tircha. I can't define how much that is. It would require a lot of effort and work to go through all the transactions and to figure out what is connected to Shabbos, what is connected to Sunday. Sometimes there are businesses where things happen over multiple days. You could have it's not a one moment transaction, and so you could figure it out. But sometimes you have to go back and figure out when was the point of sale versus the point where the deal was made, the transfer was made, and so now how do you define what is a Shabbos? What's the deal that happens on Shabbos? And to go back and calculate all these things it's not always simple. So the Rav Moshe says, in such a situation, if sometimes you can't figure out, you can't figure out what day was what, it's fine. It's not like that's a harama where I had no intention of basically going forward with the stipulations of the deal that we started with. It's just that it really is a very complicated situation, and frankly, neither myself or my partner have the time to start to get engaged in finding out these details. And in such a situation, Rav Moshe felt that was fine. It was not a harama. Okay, so that was the little note from the Mishnah from the Dirshu here. All right, Zayin. So the next point here is the im lo hisnu b'tchila. The Shulchan Aruch says if you don't make the stipulation at the beginning, so you take 1/7, give it to the non-Jew, and then the rest you split. So he writes here, Mishnah writes, Kosav stama le'esor below hisnu. Stam, we didn't make an agreement. That is the situation the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. We didn't say anything. We just went into business together. Didn't talk about this. Afilu im lo amar amorlo ata. Amorlo avud ata b'Shabbos v'ani b'chol. Even if you didn't say, oh, okay, you didn't make us. You didn't say anything about you work Shabbos, I work the weekdays. Nothing was said. And when it comes time to split the money in the cash register, you also don't mention Shabbos. You don't talk about it. It's not a topic that ever comes up. You just, 50-50. That's our business partnership. Let's just go 50-50, in splitting everything. That is prohibited according to the Shulchan Aruch. Since there was no stipulation before the partnership began, to just say split 50-50 is to give the Jew profits that happen on Shabbos, which means that now the non-Jew, we can say with confidence, when he was working on Shabbos, he was my shaliach. And that's why I'm collecting. Nobody is stopping me from taking my half of the Shabbos profits. Now we'll see in a moment here. This is going to be undermined or argued with by the Rama, but that seems to be the Shulchan Aruch's position, because he does say that when there's no stipulation, you need to split. You need to take 1/7 and immediately give it to the non-Jew, and then split the rest. Okay. Now, I don't know if we read the Rama, but it's worth reading it again just so that we remember what he says, because he does take a very different position than the Shulchan Aruch. And he says here, "V'yesh matirin haschar b'diavad, hai afilu lo hisnu v'chalku stam." Whereas we just pointed out the Shulchan Aruch thought you had to have this split of you had to take 1/7 right off the bat and give it to the non-Jewish partner. The Ramah was of the opinion, he quotes the Rosh, who says that it's mutter, the schar is mutter b'diavad. That's not ideal. Even if you didn't stipulate, you could just split it, stam, not make a big deal about it. Okay, let's split the week's profits 50-50. And the Ramah himself paskins, v'nir eli, the hefsed gadol yesh lismoch alayhu. When you're talking about a great financial loss, so you can rely on this opinion of the Rosh, that in a situation even of no stipulation, you could just split it half-half. So let's take a look here at the Ramah's comments on v'chalku stam, and that this idea of the chalku stam, that you just divvy it up without making mentioning of Shabbos, 7th, none of this stuff. Okay, here's a little bit of a longer Mishnah Berurah, so you'll have to bear with me. Here we go. Hainu shebishas chaluka lo hiskir lo Yisrael es haShabbos lo ma'ata titol keneged yom amalcha b'Shabbos v'ani etol keneged yom amali b'chol ela chalku stam b'shaveh. So he says that what we're dealing with here is at the time of divvying up the money, there is no mentioning. The Jew doesn't mention anything about Shabbos. That you take for your toil on Shabbos, and I will take for my toil on Sundays. We're not dealing with that kind of situation. Ela chalku stam. Stam means stam b'shaveh. We look in the cash register, that $200. You take 100, I take 100. Have a good day. V'gam Mairi shelo amar lo betchila. And we're not dealing with a case where at the beginning the Jew said, "Avod ata b'Shabbos v'ani avod kenegdecha b'chol." You work Shabbos, and in correspondence, I will work on one of the weekdays. Ella, so we're not dealing with that. Ella ha'edo Yehudi asa me'atzmo shelo b'tzivuyo. What we're dealing with is here, the non-Jew himself Goes, opens the cash register, says $200 here. Yankel, you take 100, I take 100. I'll see you tomorrow. That's how it works. The im lav hachi, because if that were, sorry, just looking for, I'm making sure I got that right, the acronym. The ilav hachi asur lekuli alma b'chol zeh. Because if that's not what's going on here, if there is ever a you did this, so take that, and I'll do this. Then you became my shaliach for the Shabbos part. You kept the business going, and I own the business, and I am relevant to the business on Shabbos, and so you became my shaliach, and I have access to the full profits on Wednesday because you did the work on Saturday. In some ways, that's me benefiting and profiting off of the arrangement where you did the work on Shabbos. And so, again, he is your shaliach, and that in of itself is a problem when a non-Jew is your shaliach for things that are not permissible on Shabbos. Just in general, by the way, not just in a business setting. I cannot have a non-Jew be my shaliach to do something that I can't do on Shabbos.
And that, respectfully, Rav, that knocks out the entire ill-conceived concept of the Shabbos Goy.
Yes, the idea of a Shabbos Goy is we should rename it the Mechalal Shabbos Goy. That's there are, and we will talk about the case of quote unquote the Shabbos Goy as we get further and further into this topic. The Shabbos Goy is helpful in certain circumstances when there is a choice, and by that I mean the following. Let's say that you have someone working in your home, a housekeeper or something like that, and you want the dishes to get washed after you've had a nice dinner or lunch, whatever it is on Shabbos. So there you say, but you're making them your shaliach, and they're using the hot water, let's say, right? So they're using all the hot water to wash the dishes, and it's problematic. I know that there are some minority opinions say it's okay to use the hot water, but really the opinion, I think, that makes the most sense is that hot water really shouldn't be used, because what happens is that in your hot water tank, new cold water comes in and it gets boiled on Shabbos, and you'll say, but I'm not using that. What are you talking about? If you're doing this Friday night, for sure, you would definitely benefit that the water is available to you and it's warm. So you can't say it's a psikresha de lo nichale. And you'll say, well, but I won't use it until right after Shabbos. Okay, but the fact that the hot water is available now on right after Shabbos is available to you because it was boiled on Shabbos means it was nichale. So we can't really claim it as a psikresha de lo nichale, though there is one Rav I respect greatly in who Rav and Teaneck, who claims otherwise. But anyways, so the point is, though, if the non-Jewish housekeeper decides to wash the dishes with hot water, that is probably permissible, even though you can't do that because you didn't tell them to do it with the hot water. They could have done it with cold water. As long as there is a viable other option, let's say you have a Shabbos sponge right there next to the sink or a regular sponge, and they pick up the regular sponge because they think, hey, this is better for me. I prefer this. So the job could get done with one of those Shabbos brushes. I wash the dishes every week after on Friday night after dinner with the Shabbos sponge. It gets done. The dishes are actually, maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist. I think they're pretty clean. But if you have a non-Jewish housekeeper and they make that choice themselves because they feel for themselves it's easier, then that's permissible, because as long as I gave them a viable option that was okay and they choose otherwise, then it's okay. But then that way, they're not, you can say sort of they're your shaliach, but they made the choice, daite de nafshe, to do it in a certain way. If I tell them to do it with hot water, that's a different story. Or I tell them use the sponge, or there is no other option except for the sponge, then yes, then I have essentially told them to do something that is prohibited, and I'm not allowed to do that. So most of the time, the Shabbos Goy is problematic. But sometimes it's not a Mechal Shabbos situation. You can also There are situations, we'll talk more about the examples that I just gave as we move forward. All right, where were we here? Okay, so back to the Mishnah Berurah. This is because if it's not this situation where the non-Jew just says, "Here, take half," he just no Shabbos is mentioned. It would be usher l'kuli alma according to everybody. Bechol the gali daito de shlucho hayash al Shabbos, because it would then become clear, everyone's mind would become revealed as to what they were actually thinking. And you were thinking he was my shaliach on Shabbos. V'hu amel kanegdo bechol. And yeah, I got Sunday in place of his Shabbos, doing my share on Shabbos. I got the full Sunday. Kevan shamitchila hutal al shnehem yachad. The reason is here because at the beginning we made no stipulation, and therefore half the business is mine on Shabbos, and therefore by making that trade, I am appointing him to be my shaliach for my half on Saturday, of taking care of what has to get done in the business, and I do the thing on Sunday that gets done in the business. The Mishnah Berurah, and we didn't talk about this. This is also important, though. But he says that the assumption until this point is that the Jew and the non-Jew are partners as well in the guf hadavar, in the guf of the business. They own the bathhouse physically together. They own the tanur together. Not just they are doing the business. They are splitting the actions of the business, for lack of a better way of saying it. That I own the building, but we co-own the operations of the business. No, here we were dealing with everything was co-owned. The building, the tanur, the merchatz, and the operation was all split. Aval im ein la'eno Yehudi chelek beguf hatanur. Let's say we co-own the operation of the business, right? We co-own the Tanur LLC, but I own the building. The Jew, as the Jew, I own the building. Rak shehu mekabel chelek berevach b'shvil shu ofe umasi katanur. But I own the building, but my partner, the non-Jewish partner, receives a share of the profits. Because he does part of what what the business requires here. He's baking, or he's heating up the fire. So yesh omrim delo mahani bazeh. So then afilu kishemasne betchila tol ata chelkecha b'Shabbos vani yom echad b'chol. Then even making a stipulation ahead of time doesn't help. It doesn't help. Dekevin shaguf hatanur hu shel Yisrael, since the oven is owned by the non-Jew. Is owned by the Jew. Havele kemaskir lo tanuro al Shabbos sheyasiklo bishvil zeh haschar yom. Lost my lines here. Yom echad shalchol v'aser litos Shabbos. He says that would be like a case of maskilo tanura. We talked about a few simanim ago. Maskilo tanura means I sell you the business on Shabbos. It's my business, but I sell you the business so you can run the business. And everyone knows that I own the physical property of this business, and but in the operations we co-own. So everyone knows what's happening, or what does it look like? It looks like my oven is being used on Shabbos, and it looks a little bit too much like that case of maskir lo tanuro al Shabbos, which we said was not allowed. We talked about that case. It's not normal for a tanur to be sold for a tanur. A maskir is not the normal case. People will assume that the non-Jew who is working the business on Shabbos is doing it as my employee, and therefore they are simply following my instructions, which is prohibited. And so since this case looks too much like that case, even though they own half the business, so you can say, oh, what do you mean? They're doing this because they co-own the business. It's true, but here it looks a little bit too much like the other case. And now they'll say, he was working for the non-Jew, for the Jew on Shabbos, and now and so now when I take the profits for my day on the weekday, it's prohibited according to this approach because it has this look and feel of the other case, and that's something we don't want. There's what to argue with this a little bit. I think that you maybe already see in my difficulty to explain the logic. There's what to argue here. That it's certainly not exactly the same, and people may actually know of such an arrangement from ahead of time that it's a co-owned business, even though the property is solely owned by the Jew. Anyways, let's keep going 2 more lines here, and then we can analyze this further. V'ayin b'magen Avram shemastik. The Magen Avram concludes with this case. The yesh lachush lahachmir kadei azo. He says, let's be machmir like this opinion, which was worried that it looks too much like the other case. Again, it's one opinion, and you see here it's a chumrah even according to this approach. The other approach would say, why should there be a difference? Who owns the physical property? We're talking about the profit of the business. Anyways, the Magen Avram wanted to be machmir for this case. Okay. The dafka, I don't know what we would say today in such a situation. We'll see that mostly this is irrelevant in our world when we get a little further in the Ramah. The dafka ba'ofen zeh shehu shelo behavla. When are we machmir? When it's not behavla. When the schar for Shabbos is not mixed in with other days of the week. Aval im hu b'havla kigon sheomer laofe. Let's say I say to my co-baker, we co-own this bakery. Tolata shnei beis of gimel yamim. You take 2 or 3 days. Ani beis of gimel yamim. You take 2 or 3 days. We're trying to split the days actually. You do a certain amount of days and I do a certain amount of days. So I never talk about Shabbos. Or you do Shabbos and I do Sunday. We just say you do half the days and I do half the days. I know that's not exactly perfect because it's a 7-day week. So you try to figure out whatever, something like some arrangement where you split the days. Everyone says that should be fine if you make such a stipulation from the beginning. So hisnu meikara kevan shehu behavla. So he says here at the very end that there are those achronim who reason and explain that you don't need that you don't even need to say, oh, you take 2 or 3 days or I take 2 or 3 days. Because they don't own the actual tanur, since they don't own the tanur from the beginning. Sorry, I'm trying to understand what those words hisnu meikar are doing there. She'ein le'eno Yehudi chelek v'guf hatanur hisnu meikara. Kevan shehu behavla. Oh, because it's like, because if you make a stipulation from the beginning,
if you're having a difficulty with that, Rav, it's probably because that whole notion sounds like a harama to me.
Since it's behavla, since it's part of a larger group of days, so you don't require you don't need this. You don't need to say take 2 or 3 days or take 2 or 3 days. Since from the beginning there was no chelek that the non-Jew owned in the actual physical property, so you don't need maybe I'm not sure. I'm going back and forth here in my head what that phrase means. Hold on, let's see if the charts even helps us here. Right. Okay. Maybe I'm not so sure. This is the wording is very awkward here. Perhaps what he's saying is that you don't need this stipulation at the beginning at all. Um, you don't need the stipulation at the beginning at all here, since you're doing it by Havlah, since you're taking 2 or 3 days each, right? You're not just simply splitting Shabbos. Oh, here's the Shabbos. You made $100 on Shabbos, and Sunday's $100. You're just doing 2 or 3 days, so it's already behavla. So you don't need to make any kind of um, arrangement. That's already behavla, and that would be permissible. Okay. Again, these are very strange. There's a little bit foreign to us. The idea that if we co-owned a business and you took 3 days of the business and I took 3 days of the business is not what I gather is a normal way to run a business today. What really how you run the business is what we're about to see now. And I will stop in just a minute here. But the Ramah talks about everything we were dealing with until now. Lo Everyone was doing their day. I did Shabbos, you did Sunday, I did Monday, you did Tuesday, you Wednesday, Thursday, which is, again, I don't know that that's how normally businesses are broken up. Usually what happens is, we co-own the business. We work the business together, all the time. And on Saturdays, on Saturday, I don't show up, but my partner shows up. So muter lachloki mo kol aschar. So then it's perfect. It's fine to actually just split the profits right down the middle, or however the arrangement is. It's not that he's working my day. In the arrangement before, it was like, when he works on Saturday, he's taking my share of it. Or I'm supposed to work half of Saturday and he works half of Saturday, whatever it is. And so what we're seeing here is that if they work the business 24/7 together, then on Saturday, 24/6, and then on Saturday, I don't show up. So that's fine, because when he goes to work, he's going a daite de nafshekavi. That's the most important factor in permitting work done on Shabbos by a non-Jew that relates back to a Jew. And that's what he's doing it for his own good. He wants the business to succeed. I'm okay if the business is closed on Shabbos. I don't tell you have to go in. I make it very clear that if it stays closed, that's fine. The partner keeps wanting to open the business on Shabbos. So that malacha doesn't trace back to me. It's not like, we are splitting hairs here, and I have half of Shabbos, and or now you are working on Shabbos, but the deal is you get the Shabbos day and I get the Sunday. That's more problematic, because now you're my shliach on that part of the business. But here we're talking about a full partnership. When you take the profits at the end of the week or the end of the month, don't be separating out Shabbos, just the Havlah, and in a larger, it's swallowed up in a larger group. This is what the Ran says, and this is how the seems to be the Ramah Paskins, which would be a very helpful guiding halachic principle or psak when it comes to setting up a business that is co-owned by a Jew and a non-Jew. The business can be open on Shabbos. You can have a restaurant, a kosher restaurant, co-owned between a Jew and a non-Jew, and it can be open on Shabbos. I don't want to get into politics here. Many kashrus organizations will not give such a hashgacha because they don't want to get involved and engaged in businesses that are open on Shabbos, but that is in itself not a psul. It is not something that invalidates the business because it's open on Shabbos, so long as there is such an arrangement. And of course, very importantly, the Jew has nothing to do with the business on Shabbos. That's where a lot of the kashrus organizations get a little nervous. They're nervous that the Jew is behind the scenes making comments about what should be done on Shabbos, and really it's not their business. It's really not something. It really is prohibited to get involved in anything that is related to what happens on Shabbos. Simeon, I saw you wanted to say something.
Yes, Rav, in all due respect to the Ramah, the Jew is still benefiting from the arrangement, from what's going on Shabbos. I could see
100%.
that he's trying to address serious problems. I saw the serious problem manifest with the capital infrastructure that we learned just before that. What do you do? What do you do about that? But it seems to me that if the Jew is getting any kind of benefit from the work that is being done on Shabbos, whether he is there or not there, it seems to me that is a harama, and it's simply a runaround.
So I'll explain. We'll talk more when we read the Mishnah Berurah's comments on the Ramah next week, why it's not a harama and it's not a runaround, because actually we're okay with the fact that it's that the non-Jew is nehna memela. It's benefit that just sort of accrues. It's like the case of the aris, the sharecropper who works on Shabbos, and I benefit from that as well. Even though, but why is it permissible? Because a daite did not shake of it, and if I get a side benefit from the fact that they did work on Shabbos, so I get a side benefit. I never told them to do it. I'm not actually separating out the Shabbos part as well. At the end of the month, I look in the cash register. I didn't tell them to work on Shabbos, and we split the money. Whatever, as long as I don't start, taking 50-50 of what happened on Shabbos specifically, then it is okay. It's a side benefit, and the side benefit is permissible by the letter of the law. We will talk more about that though next week. Hinda, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to this, but the business of the restaurant, you have to pay a mashgiach to be there, especially if it's only being run by a guy on Shabbos. Get around that.
So again, the arrangement probably with the mashgiach would have to be one where you're not paying him for what he did on Shabbos, but you're paying him behavlah for a larger, for the month that he worked, for the whatever larger group of time.
And he chooses to be there on Shabbos. Come on.
If you're saying the mashgiach chooses to be there on Shabbos, so the mashgiach could have to be there on Shabbos, so long as it's an interesting situation. Somebody who was once asked to do this at Sammy's Bagels for a few months.
I'm not talking about that, but something like Talia's Steakhouse. It's classic. You can't have a business. Right. You have to have a mashgiach there.
Right. They're open on Shabbos for pre-reservations, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Open. There has to be a mashgiach there.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. We'll talk more about it. I hear your question. We'll touch on this next week. I think with the Mishnah Berurah's comments may help in moving us forward in that discussion. Yeah, Tommy, go ahead.
The mashgiach is a very great situation because we have mashgiachim at the shul when there is a caterer. The kids used to go on the mashgiachim, as teenagers many times, and they got paid for that day. So I'm not sure that they took it as I'm just there, and they just give it to me because they like me. It's just.
Yeah, so the mashgiach situation on Shabbos is interesting. Yeah, you're not supposed to get paid for things you do on Shabbos only. So if it's there are let me put it diplomatically. There are ways to work around it. The same question goes: how do you pay a high holiday chazan? They work on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. How do you pay them? So they have to practice, and you start to find other ways to justify it. Lamaisa, it happens. It's definitely the minhag. No, what can I say?
I understand, Rav, that rabbis are not allowed to be paid on Shabbos either. What do you think?
By the way, it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. Can you pay the? So the point is, by the way, with regards to that, of course, they have Shabbos responsibilities. In my contract, it says something about how I have to work on Shabbos. How could they put that in my contract? I wonder every day. By the way, period. No. Yeah. So again, if it's in a larger substance, and you don't talk about what the money is going for. The money is I pay you because you're the rabbi, you're the chaz, and you're the mashgiach. And the mashgiach has other work too. It's much more problematic when the mashgiach is only a Shabbos mashgiach. That becomes more complicated. But if you're just that your job is to be a mashgiach, and I don't start talking about what day is what and this day is that, then you're just a mashgiach, And it's understood, of course, you have to come on Shabbos, but you're not. We're not discussing directly that you're going to, you're getting paid for what you do on Shabbos. You're just a mashgiach. It becomes a little bit more dicey when you start saying, how many hours did you work on Shabbos and you're paid by the hour. It's a little dicey, but I acknowledge that probably does go on. So we'll have to find a justification for it. Have a good week, everybody. I'll update you about next time if we're in person or not. Have a good week.
Thank you very